Lenses as wide as 8mm are considered a little bit specialist, but during the review of this lens I've been surprised by how much I've enjoyed using the focal length, but also how much I've been able to shoot with it. This Meike 8mm f2.8 lens is designed specifically for micro four thirds, and at just under £300 and just over $300, it seems to represent pretty good value for money. The 109-degree angle of view this 8mm focal length produces will give us the sort of coverage we'd expect from a 16mm lens on a full-frame camera. This is a manual focus lens, of course, and it doesn't offer the niceties of optical image stabilization or anything as luxurious as the electronic contacts that pass data to the camera. So aperture and focal length information won't be embedded in your picture files. The aperture range runs from f2.8 to f22, and we can focus right down to 25 centimeters. This is a pretty solid lens that feels nicely made, with a full metal body that houses a total of 17 elements arranged in 12 groups. Meike doesn't tell us what those elements are, but you can see the forward glass is a dome-like convex lens that protrudes nicely from the front of the lens. I'm guessing too that there are some low dispersion elements in there, but possibly not much high refractive index glass as the lens is relatively large. It sticks out 74mm from the front of the camera and measures 80mm across at its widest. All that metal and glass gives us a total weight of 480 grams, with a lot of those grams concentrated on the forward end. The size and weight of the lens means it's comfortable to use handheld on the full range of micro four thirds cameras. For this review, I used it mostly on the Lumix GH6, on the GX9, as well as the GX880, and it was as at home on one as it was on the others. We have a built-in petalled lens hood on the front that has a 77mm thread, though any filter screwed to the front of the lens will inevitably appear in your pictures if you are shooting with the full sensor area. Videographers, though, will get away with it, as the 16:9 frame avoids any mechanical vignetting, so long as the filter frame is slim enough. We have a rough and heavy texture on the focus ring that makes identifying it by touch easy, and which means that we can turn the ring even with gloves on. The ring rotates nicely and is marked with measurements in both meters and feet. It takes only a quarter turn, though, to get us from the 25 centimeter mark to infinity, so accuracy is a little more tricky than it could be. As is often the case with lower cost lenses, the smaller aperture settings are rather bunched together on one side of the lens, while the wider ones have a lot more space. So again, slight focus adjustments can be more difficult to effect. The aperture ring, though, is clickless, so we can adjust the iris during filming without the clicks disrupting our soundtrack. And you could, in theory at least, fit a geared ring adapter for follow focus rigs. I've been very pleased with the image quality of this lens produces, and relieved that even though it's a cost-effective lens, its optical standards are pretty high. Resolution is not astonishing at any aperture, and I found an extra dose of unsharp mask is needed to minimise the effects of the lack of absolute sharpness when photographing subjects containing a lot of fine detail. Fortunately, most micro four thirds cameras have no more than 20 million pixels, so this issue won't cause too many drastic problems. You have to look pretty closely to notice. There's also a bit of smearing in the corners of the frame where the subject appears to be rushing away from the picture. This is common in extreme wide angles but not unavoidable, though fortunately in this case it isn't too distracting. Good news includes the remarkably well-controlled curvilinear distortion that doesn't bend straight lines that are close to the edges of the frame. You need to keep the camera level, as you do with all wide angles, if you want to avoid exaggerated wonkiness. But when we do the right thing, the lens rewards us with drawing that's good enough for architecture. Contrast is generally on the low side and is helped with the clarity and contrast sliders, and chromatic aberrations that often show as coloured fringes on high contrast edges are very few and far between. I also found vignetting, where the corners of the frame are darker than the centre of the frame, is also well controlled, and it won't become a feature of your images. If you're a fan of sun stars and star bursts around your highlights, you'll be delighted. This is a nice lens that offers good value for money, but its budget price doesn't come at the cost of build or image quality. The lens is very well made and the pictures it captures look great. You should accept that you'll need a touch more sharpening than usual and that you may need to pump up the contrast, but you won't suffer with dramatic distortion, corner shading or coloured fringing, which would all be much more damaging to your images than the lack of absolute resolution of this lens. Lens work very well on all the cameras I've used it on, but if there was one thing I'd want in the next version, it would be electronic contacts for EXIF data and communication with the camera. But for now, I can live without that. Good price, nice performance, and it's a lot of fun to use.